Well, hello there, my dear children of the apocalypse. How are we doing today? Welcome back to Doom Time, and today with me I have the Scottish Koala, and I want to get this out of the way immediately. I actually don't know you. You're one of the few people I've had on here that I don't think we've never spoken, right?
No, I think we've had one interaction before through someone else who was making content back in the old guard for War Thunder years ago. It was about 2019, I think.
Yeah, 2019 feels like yesterday, but in reality now it's been 4 years, right?
It
Gosh,
feels crazy long ago to me. So much has happened.
yeah.
I
Um,
think everything took off from me just after that.
yes, you were one of the guys that I would consider I think of it like trilogies in a way, The the original trio, I think, was NTAC, Baron from Games, and Fly Daily. Fly being the only one that's still around. Then you had these like new and upcoming, should we call us the troublemakers? Like myself, Slick B, a couple of others. We loved getting into drama. We loved having some sort of banter and whatnot. And I think now, from what I have seen, I obviously don't play the game anymore. I don't follow the environment that much, but you are one of the few guys that I've noticed that creates content that it's very, how should I put it, on the spot without being edgy. Like, you have this polite way of approaching the drama and the toxicness that can War Thunder be at sometimes, right?
I do try and how shall I put this? Not shy away from anything that's going on in the community while not wanting to stir up more drama about it. It's always interesting to get to the bottom of what people are pissed about. And I've made a couple of mistakes doing that and pissed some people off even more. But uh, bottom line is, I tend to try and be involved to the point where it gets to the bottom of what the drama's about, rather than just kicking up more dust.
hmm Yeah, it's definitely a more mature approach. How old are you actually? That's something I probably should have asked immediately to get a gauge.
You and I are about the same age.
All right.
I was 1997,
So
so
we are
yeah, I
we are
turned
both.
26
Yeah,
couple of months ago.
yeah, very nice. We're the same year. Yeah, for me it took me a long time to get to that point where I realized maybe Orange maybe being a little bit too on the edgy side. But it reminds me a lot, and I hate talking about the guy, obviously Andrew Tate, but I felt at some point, looking back at it, like I was some kind of Andrew Tate of War Thunder, where you're trying to take this giant, titter-totter or a scale, if you will, and you see that the only way you could try to fix the sort of imbalance is to stand at the absolute extreme edge of that leverage curve just to try to make some difference. And I think in the long run, it really is damaging. So it's I'm happy to see that you're one of those content creators that was able to go into the more, how I say, polite, mature.
Yeah, I sort of tried to distance myself from that when I saw myself heading in that same direction as well. So I thought, oh, this is more stressful than it's worth, trying to sort of tiptoe around the worst of the drama. Why don't I just leave it for that and focus on some of the more basic points of it and not go too deep into things that are pissing people off.
Mhm. So primarily, you are a tank enthusiast, I'd say, right? More tank based than plane based, or
It's sort of started out the opposite of that, actually. I think it's become more tanks because that's been what's popular in the games community. So as things have gotten more and more modern as well, tanks have overtaken planes. We started out back in the old day. We had your Sabres and your
hmm
M60s were your top of the game, and Gaijin were adding more and more and more tanks that were breaching the decades, to the point where we've got tanks in the game now that are newer than the game itself is.
yeah.
But aircraft were still back in the 60s. So I sort of had more to tackle. There was more change that was coming around tanks. So I sort of ended up accidentally focusing on that when that wasn't what I set out to do initially. And it certainly wasn't where I was better at the game. I can definitely say that. But yeah, that's where it ended up.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, you have also spread out with your YouTube channels to create an additional YouTube channel, correct?
Hmm. It's now become the bigger one, actually, which is called the ArmourCast channel. And it was sort of an accidental thing in the end, where I made my content around War Thunder by talking about the difference between what these things were like in real life when these new vehicles were being added, and talking about what their combat history was, what their capabilities were, and what people were going to be able to expect from them, and then comparing that to what we would actually get in the game. Eventually, I started talking about just the history of the vehicles, and then sectioned that away into its own channel, which is now absolutely exploded. We've got a couple of videos with millions of views now, and yeah, that's become sort of more where I've been comfortable recently. I say recently, I've been in limbo for the past couple of months where I haven't really uploaded anything. But other than that, that's become more the business side of things at the moment. And the War Thunder channel is off to the side, still a bit of fun. But yeah, the more serious thing is the talking about the almost mini documentaries and explanation videos around historical and technological concepts. So I try and tie it in with the video games where I can. A lot of these videos I'll use War Thunder footage or other games footage in the background, but no, other than that, they are two separate channels now. So
would you say that that's partially due to, obviously you're far more familiar with what was going on with War Thunder the past couple of months. A question that I like to ask my guests is, do you still play War Thunder, and why? With you, I would assume you probably still play it, maybe not as regularly as both of us did back then. Has the drama, the enjoyment you get from the game affected your choices here, to sort of perhaps start thinking more into the documentary side of things, where it's more informative, it's moving away from entertainment? Also, as we're growing older, maybe you're thinking further ahead now, and trying to also think about
something to take a little more seriously. The War Thunder dramas. I mean, I had planned a video recently, actually, where I said that I thought War Thunder had about 2 years left, where I said, this game will not be, since we used to play, I remember logging on and seeing about 44,000 players online on a good day. And nowadays, you can see anything up to 120, 130,000 people online in the peak times, 80, 90 off-peak times. So it's more popular now. But I'm sort of thinking it was going to head back down the other way, and that we were sort of seeing the twilight years of War Thunder. And then recently, Gaijin came out and announced a whole buttload of changes that we were trying to get done in the economy of the game for years. And I thought, shit, things are actually picking back up in a way I was looking at, being like, well, this might be the end. But it was almost, it wasn't just a case of wanting to distance myself from War Thunder, but also a case of it was something to take a little more seriously. It was something to branch out and see what worked, and it happened to work. So I got a couple of contacts with other YouTubers, and that type of content started becoming quite popular. So I thought, mainly I was struggling to balance doing both War Thunder content and the real life military history stuff. You had the history fans coming to the channel and being like, oh, I'm not interested in all this video game stuff. Or the War Thunder fans being like, this is way too nerdy for me. So separating the two of them was just kind of the only logical move in the end, rather than being a specific intention.
Yeah, it's always a challenge to figure out how you can, say, diversify, because there's always that risk of, quite literally killing off your channel, right? Where all the viewers are essentially not interested in the content that you're trying to provide. And I think you did the correct decision to venture out, take a leap of faith, and it worked out in the end.
Yeah, it's certainly gone well. I've still been able to incorporate. We've got a series called "Your Favorite Tank Sucks," so I can still have a bit of fun with it, do a bit of joking, rambling content without just being purely. I don't want to become robotic. I set out to make mostly light-hearted, fun videos that would help people, but mostly just to entertain. And I didn't want to lose that, but also wanted to use it in a different way. So I've been able to kind of tie the two together in that way, where I talk a little bit more about different potential vehicles that could be added to War Thunder, because that's a thing that excites people to think about, what could be in this game in the future. Meanwhile, on the other channel, I can do a bit of rambling and joking, and it kind of keeps the two still recognizably me in the end. But yeah, it's definitely started going well enough that I have to think about it quite like a business rather than
Hmm.
just like a hobby now. You know, if I want to go further with this, it's getting to the point where there's quite a few eyes on it now, and if I want to do things like you know, if I want to grow further into things like sponsorships and all the good stuff that comes with bigger YouTube channels, you gotta kind of have a bit more of a mature atmosphere about it, and you know, really sort of work at it properly rather than treating it like a hobby or a bit of fun to
Hmm.
do in the afternoons. You know, it's become a lot of work that I wasn't prepared for, but it's still really enjoyable. So I kind of just want to keep doing it in a more and more professional way.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's grown to the point where it's very different to when I started it.
Yeah, and do you now at this moment, like, is this your full time thing, or do you do something? Is this like a side
It
hustle
is.
for now? Okay.
It is. It has been for a little while. Luckily, I've been able to. I grew the second channel very quickly,
Hmm.
much more quickly than I was anticipating. So that was quite lucky. I was able to branch out and not struggle for years like I was building a channel from scratch again. It shot up quite quickly, so that was able to take over as a source of income. And now it's just keeping it going and not getting what's the word? Sort of getting
Like complacent, or
bogged down with yeah, and sort of just it being over the top, it being too much,
hmm
sort of weighing down on me. You know, if it's a lot of work for not too much gain, it wouldn't be as
yeah,
yeah, it's still something I really enjoy doing regardless, but it's got to make some money. So,
yeah. There is
you know,
there's
the fact that it was
discrepancy.
able to,
Hmm.
the fact that it was able to is was very lucky to begin with, and now it's now it's really taken over.
That's brilliant. Because there is some, I think, discrepancy with people expecting that, making money on YouTube is really easy, but in reality, the numbers are often quite low, at least from my experience. I think at one point I even turned off all the advertising because I said I don't even want to bother looking at the numbers. And these days you are, like you mentioned, you're trying to find external sponsors, right, to put them actually embedded into the video, which means you have to have a mature atmosphere. It has to be ad friendly, and you also have to filter through some bad options for sponsorships, right? You probably
Oh
have
yeah,
certain standards,
definitely.
and
I've the amount of Raid Shadow Legends offers I've gotten. Some of them were even legit. Like, you know, you get the emails every other week, but most of them are either complete nonsense or just people looking to scam you. And yeah, finding good ones that are not only legit and that you can trust, but also that I would not be embarrassed. I
hmm
wouldn't feel like just a shill to talk to my audience about. As it's I haven't looked much into the sponsorship thing as of yet. I've had a couple where I've been like, this is pretty cool, but going forward, I definitely want to sort of um, look into appealing wider to
hmm
more different kinds of sponsors, see what people interact with and what people aren't there for, and make that sort of a more major focus of or a more major aspect of the money earning side of things, so that I'm not just focused on YouTube, just hammering the views
yes,
to earn money from ad revenue because
hmm
it's not nearly as much as people think.
yeah,
It's good. It was, when I was uploading a lot more regularly, it was earning quite good money, at least as far as I was concerned. But it's never good to need to rely on that
hmm
because it can be fickle.
yeah,
We say there's certain months on YouTube that can just get stuffed.
yeah,
Like December can suck a fat dick. Like there, you just don't earn ad revenue in December, January. It's just
yeah,
next to nothing. It's
yeah.
just flat. So being able to have something else supplement that is that's the future of it for me.
Do you think? Because I was thinking about this the other day. With sponsorships first going, because if you remember YouTube back in, I don't know, 2008, it was essentially just a couple of ads that were plastered on the website. And you could then click on them. And then we moved into more sophisticated methods. Do you think there might be a future where they create a system, now whether this will be on YouTube or some other platform, where the advertisements would actually be quality advertisements, but sort of burnt into the content so that you could really interact with them in a better way? Do you think that might be some sort of future?
I would like to see something like that where it is more interactive and then gets out of the way. You know, everyone, some YouTubers do these quite long ad reads, and some of them can really make like they make it a part of the content. They make it very enjoyable, but for some of them, it's also just a bit of like, how can I skip through this video to
Hmm.
find where the ad stops? But if they can make it more interactive for a shorter period of time and then get it out of the way. It's there for people who want it, and then it doesn't interrupt for people who don't.
Yeah, because I know personally I've installed this Google extension which essentially skips through any part of any built-in advertisement anyway. Even I think on YouTube, on your Android, you've got like a YouTube Advanced app that does the same thing, which could also be a negative because sometimes I am actually interested those good YouTubers that enjoy the content, but also I mean let's be real, if you're getting paid large sums of money, which some people are, you are also quite motivated to make that bit that's a built-in sponsorship really engaging and fun and playful.
Mm.
And sometimes
Mm.
you miss out on that. But the majority of them are, like you said, just sort of, they're force read. They're like, I guess I'll put this in here because I got to make ends meet.
Yeah, I had one from World of Tanks. Unfortunately, it didn't actually turn into a video. It didn't get published. But trying to make it quite a fun part of the content to do, to put the advert in a way that was quite seamless and didn't feel like it was just tacked on after finishing the video and just thought, oh, shove an advertisement in there. It's difficult. It's a lot of work. And sponsorships on YouTube can be sort of your bread and butter, but they do require a lot of work if you're going to put that effort into it, because you don't just get sent like an ad section and something to read out and something to plop in the video. Like I spent a good few hours sort of editing bits
Hmm.
together and deciding how I was going to phrase it and what needed to be said and trying to make it fun. But if you don't, it sort of just comes across the wrong way and people aren't interested. So that doesn't help you either.
Yeah, a lot of it is forced. I mean, from what I remember, the last time I ever did one of the sponsored ones, it was actually Raid Shadow Legends. I remember that, getting the big PDF document. It's like, these are the highlights that have to be mentioned. These are the things that are nice to mention. Here's some material. And most of it was just like, I can't make anything with this. It felt like,
Mm.
you weren't given the actual equipment where if I had the app, if I actually played the game, if I was actually enjoying it, that gives you some motivation. But then it starts to become that level of playing field where it's like, am I ready to invest so much time into the actual advertisement when I have a video that's really the core of what I'm trying to create here, right?
Yeah, it can't take away from the video has been my rule. Like if I have to spend so much time
Mm-hmm.
sort of working out how I'm going to do it, it's just not worth it in the end. But no, World of Tanks is one I've had a few times that they've reached out to me and I've been like I've actually played the game. I do really enjoy it. I specifically remember saying like my best fun in War Thunder was after playing World of Tanks for 6 months, and after playing War Thunder for a few years, stepped into World of Tanks and
Mm-hmm.
thought, I like how this is different. It always seems like everyone was wanting to be on one camp or the other, but I thought after actually playing it and being like, no, I do actually quite like this. It was easy to do an ad read for them, but then I've had some others I've been like, I don't like sort of just promoting this because I don't
Mm-hmm.
use it. I don't need it. So I don't have that personal sort of I can't endorse it really, or if I am, it's fake, it's put on. So I don't like to do that. If I can avoid it, I will.
Yeah, if it goes against
But
your core personality, I think it's not worth going, unless it's a
mm,
huge amount of money. But I think that's everybody has a price. For a certain amount of money, I'll be willing to
yeah.
do a lot of things. Now, most companies, unfortunately, for sponsorship wise, they're not offering that much. They're usually lowballing you, and then you have to sort of adjust your worth. And that's also, how do you value it, right? I mean, what exactly is the
Mm,
number you're trying to value? Because even with, we're talking about ad revenue, is like I said, fluctuates from month to month. People might have a glance at your channel, think, oh wow, so many subscribers, and they do the math in their head and they're thinking, oh yeah, you'll get $5 per thousand views. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't work that way. And
on a good month, maybe,
mm-hmm.
but it depends on a whole load of factors. I've never really spent that much time looking into the analytics side of YouTube, like I need more engagement here, or I need to upload at specific times, or try and make videos a specific length because this is, really studying the side of this is when people
Yes.
are clicking away. This is what people are interacting with the most. I don't bother looking into that when I structure out a video, when I plan, I sort of just say it the way it naturally unfolds to make the video, and however people react to it, great. If I can do something similar to that, but I don't spend ages studying it. It's just sort of, oh, this month was a bit low. Oh well, gotta work harder next time. So,
Yeah.
if I was spending too long looking really in depth at that side of things, I don't think I would enjoy it anymore. So I just never really bothered.
Yeah. So you say that personally wise, you're not very. I call those people robotic essentially. I mean, I've got a coworker now, working as a copywriter, and he's very smart with ChatGPT. He's also interested in it, which I'm not. For me, it's like it's a tool. I'll use it, but preferably I still like to write by hand. And I've observed his workflow because we were doing basically two identical things at the same time. Timing, how much time did it take? Equivalent, let's say, if we both went and said, let's record a video, how much time do you spend editing? How much time are we going to spend making the hook at the beginning? Let's say if we wanted to make some TikToks. And I was observing his workflow, and it was extremely sort of, he would start a thing, and until he finished it, he wouldn't move to the next portion. Meanwhile, I was all over the place because I like dancing around the content. And I sometimes remember even making videos, I would have stopped mid-content, did something else, or even playing the game, recording whilst I was editing content to sort of multitask. And I think you remind me
No,
a bit more of
I
me.
find I do that the same way as well. I'll kind of flip from project to project, or at least different parts of
Hmm.
it. I'll start recording something and feel like, no, that doesn't quite sound right. That doesn't sound the way it did in my head, and then end up going and rewriting half the script for the video, or the notes that I've got, the talking points, being like, I don't need that. I'll make the video differently, or I'll just start making another video. And funnily enough, I've got leftover notes and scripts from videos that were meant to happen in 2020. Like that's so long ago at this point, and I just sort of never got around to finishing it, and thought, this isn't necessary anymore. This isn't relevant anymore.
Hmm.
Um, but I find often, especially with the military side of things, and one of the reasons I've strayed away from covering current events and news in that world, and talks more about the history and development of things that were long past. There's no surprises being sprung on us from World War II now. But when I was talking about current things that were happening, little new article would come out and I'd be like, ah, shit, I've got to rewrite half the
Hmm.
video now. So if I would I would say I flit around more than I probably should, but it's the way I find I make the better content without
Hmm.
it feeling robotic. A couple of times I've put a video out being like, probably should have just waited and done that better, but it's worked for me so far.
Hmm. Maybe maybe an edgy question, but would you say that with the ArmourCast channel and with the events of Ukraine for the past 2 years now, do you think that has somehow also, I mean, quote unquote, helped you, or been a point of interest which then relates to the content of your channel?
It's been something that's brought a lot of people in as people are wanting to know a bit of background information about things they're hearing about, whether it's different types of armor or different munitions that are being used, different vehicles that are being sent in military aid packages, and how that all works. But mainly, I decided to say, look, I would have to be very careful about what I was saying at that point. I don't want to just be uh, so opinionated that people put me in a box to a degree. Like I would find it much more um, enjoyable to just be able to talk about something
Hmm.
that's quite concrete, just rather than interpreting current events and giving opinions on sort of one side or the other. And I've been very vocal about it on, for example, Twitter and other social media. But on the ArmourCast channel, I decided, look, I would have to be really, really careful about this, and sort of intentionally didn't cover it. Um, and a lot of people did. I've made a few friends in the community for people who grew their channels, went from a couple of thousand to hundreds of thousands of subscribers by covering events in Ukraine, and they put so much effort into it. And talking to them about it, they were like, "It is, you've got to be careful because you say a few things
Hmm.
wrong, people will be, steam coming out their ears. They'll be up in arms at you if you say the wrong thing." So I haven't covered it much if at all. And I might do in the future now that, bits of this war are over a year old at this point. You can kind of talk about them now as bits of history, or looking at how these particular examples can lend themselves to a wider topic. But I I said from the beginning of the war that, like, I'm not a journalist. I'm not a reporter. I will leave this to people who are vastly more qualified than I am to deal with this. And even though there's plenty I would say, maybe it's better kept private, some
Yeah.
of it. Or at least, I'd have to put a lot of work into making sure everything I say I can back up, or be very careful about. And then, 3 new things happen, and the whole situation's changed, and I'd have to rewrite the whole thing anyway. So I thought, why don't we not do that for now?
Mm.
At least until I've got maybe a couple of researchers to assist me in making the videos. But that's miles down the track when the channel's bringing in more of an income. As far as the shit, what was I going to say? Being sort of the idea that I didn't want to start reporting on current events, I certainly could have, but I wanted to not become that. And like I said, I didn't want to be a reporter. I didn't want to be a journalist. I wanted to talk about the history side of things, and the stories behind, I made a video a while ago. It's no longer on the channel, but it was about the Falklands War. That's in the 80s. And that was really interesting to look at and kind of talk through the history of it, because it doesn't really have any bearing on today. But even then, there were some people up in arms about it, because it's still a sore spot for some people. So I intentionally tried to avoid it, maybe more than I needed to, but that was the way I decided to deal with it.
It's probably safer that way. Also, I was going to ask you, for those people that have actually grown their channels, as you said, to a couple of 100,000 very quickly, covering the events of Ukraine, do you also think that might be a bit of a danger spot, in the sense they, rise to fame, potentially quite a larger sum of income, but then eventually, obviously, the war in Ukraine will fade away, and they'll have to move on to the next, we could call it feature of the month or feature of the year. Um, would you find that to be their potential downfall, or do you think they enjoy the type of idea of just always starting off something new? And
It really depends on. I know a couple of people who have grown quite large channels, and they've said, "Look, I was never planning on making a career out of it. So if it does fade away, if the war were to end tomorrow, and there were only a few more videos I could make talking about things that are now past, and people stop being interested in it, it doesn't really matter. It was never going to be a lifelong thing. But for me, I was thinking, like, I don't want to become known for that." Because if I am, that sort of puts you in a box that you can't branch out from very easily. And that would be a worry if, things were to not be able to translate into something long term. I would like YouTube or something to do with, the content that I've begun to make to last for a very long time. And hopefully this war doesn't. So eventually it's just not going to be a source of content anymore. So that's another reason I wanted to stay away from it. So yeah, definitely. But some of the others, I have already begun to notice that they are struggling to gain that, they would got, 4, 5, 6 million views on every video 9 months ago. And now all of a sudden they're getting, 120,000, 130,000. And it's clearly not as much at the forefront of it's not being pushed as much on social media anymore. It's not constantly in the news anymore. It's not at the forefront of people's people don't want to hear about it as much anymore. It's old news to some. So they have, I think they are going to struggle, especially if they want to transition it into a long-term channel. Then yeah, they are gonna have some difficulties around that. But yeah, now some of them have got a guy by the name of Perun on YouTube, who makes these fantastic videos. He puts so much effort into them. And he's someone who really should easily be able to transition into talking about more than just this conflict if he wants to. I'm not sure if he does plan on making it a career or not, but there are certainly ways around it. I just didn't get involved with the whole thing. I thought, yeah, not for me. I'll stay away from it.
I was going to ask you, how long ago did your YouTube journey actually start? And what was the catalyst or the moment? Was there maybe like a an idol or somebody that you? Cause obviously, most of us, I think, for me, I remember maybe like the Mighty Jingles, where you sort of say to yourself, "Damn, I'd also like to make this kind of content." Like, what was the moment in your heart where you went like, "Damn, this is actually something I would really enjoy doing and bringing people quality content."
For me, I had tried my hand at making YouTube channels a few times in the past and never really went anywhere. The Scottish Koala took off in about 2018. I started it late in 2017, and it was 2018 that it really started growing to 1,000, 2,000 subscribers. And to begin with, it was almost the complete opposite of that, as I saw bits of types of content that people weren't making. Um, and there were a few. I more so the fact that I just didn't notice them. They weren't as big, and I of course wasn't as big to start out with. But I saw a gap in the content that was being made. I thought, it's quite fun. I can fill it. If people are interested, then it might become more of a thing. Um, but I remember your content from back in sort of 2016, 17, 18 was part of an inspiration from mine, or some of mine to begin with. And then, of course, people like Jingles, people like Baron,
Hmm.
Slick B, I remember. But as well as that, it was bits of content that people weren't making, and I thought I'd try my hand at them and see if they worked.
Wonderful, because I was going to say you're an extremely eloquent person, and that ties into perhaps well, for me, it's an interesting question, which is that the name itself, right? Scottish Koala. If I understand correctly, I mean, from your voice, you're obviously not from Australia, but you live in Australia, correct?
Yeah, yeah. So I was born in Scotland. I was actually born in England. My mum was living down there for work for a few months when she had me, but we lived in a place called Ayr, which is on the west coast of Scotland, for a few years, and then moved out to Australia when my mother married my stepfather. So I've lived here for a long time. The accent's sort of a weird smush between. Like, a lot of Scottish people are just like, really? And a lot of Australian people think that my accent's really thick, and then everyone else thinks it's somewhere in between. But that kind of became uh it was a brand, and it wasn't to begin with, because I also did this weird thing when I was starting out on YouTube, is I was afraid that people were gonna either not understand what I was saying or not like the accent. I tried to almost Americanize my
Hmm.
voice, so that, sort of play down the accent to the point where it just was a bit weird, and I had to literally focus on what I was saying and how I was saying it. But I gave up on that a little while on Twitch. I was just speaking naturally and seeing, put some of that content on YouTube, see if people enjoy it, and just sort of realized that I didn't need to in the end. So it, the Scottish Koala became the brand, but originally it was just a name,
Hmm.
and and then I've sort of realized that it's a little bit unique. I'm hardly the only one like myself, but it's something to brand yourself around. So yeah, that's really all it is.
I mean, I think I'd find it quite hard to find a person who went from Scotland to Australia, and because to me, I have this thing I call like a essentially a meter. There's a ceiling level to how long you can listen to somebody talk, right? If we imagine like a really like a classic Karen, right, with a very high pitched, annoying voice, or some very maybe nasally kind of guy, there's you can only listen to them for a certain portion of time, right? With obviously, I love the Scottish accent. I think it takes me back to Sean Connery and all the movies and everything that England brings to me. It's just such a wonderful place. And then you have the depth of the voice, you have the dynamic. Um, to me, it's I can only commend you for being in this industry, and hopefully that whatever thing you're gonna partake in your future, you stay in activity with your voice. That's something that you take forth. Because to me personally, I'm sure for everybody else, and that's also why your channel succeed, is because you're extremely pleasurable to listen to.
Well, I mean, thank you for one. A couple of times I have said jokingly on Twitter or on Discord that, like, the amount of money I could make on YouTube if I just got like ChatGPT to write a video and a text-to-speech voice to read it out and then put some stock images in the background. Mike, that's 70% of military content on YouTube these days, and it's all bullshit. Like anytime you hear a text-to-speech voice, disregard anything they're saying. It's all researched through Wikipedia. Like but like my God, is it a big thing on the internet now, and people have been like, what would be the point? You know, like it's not sort of. I don't want to sound arrogant, but I like to think that at least a lot of the people who watch me are watching it for me rather than just, anyone could make this and it would be the same.
Mm-hmm.
I've found a niche where I can do something that I like to do and people like listening to me talk about it. So
No,
it works. So
I
yeah.
absolutely agree. I think that I was talking to a friend the other day about the advancement of AI. Obviously, they've got these effects now where you can sound like anybody essentially, and the way that I thought of it was, if we take somebody like David Attenborough, who's doing all the BBC, National Geographic type videos, a person like him is going to have his voice essentially forever, right? I would imagine that after he passes away, his voice will remain in the same strength, present in documentaries forever to follow. And I think if you can find a way to now, as you are still alive and you do still have your voice, to bring it to a certain level, then that is what's going to make it unique. Not the idea that we're now going to just, every video is going to have the voice of Morgan Freeman, because then that will actually lose its uniqueness, right?
Mm.
So I think sticking to it and developing, in this case yours, which I think is very unique. I've always gotten quite a lot of compliments for my own English, having taken it from that scruffy Slovene type-esque whatever it was, and then developing it. I think
I did comment this in one of your videos once, but when I first started watching you, I thought you were English. I did not realize you were from Slovenia at all. I wouldn't have picked it. Wouldn't have guessed that in a million years. But yeah, no, it's likewise. Like I found it, especially the War Thunder content you made, where it was sort of a guide for people who were struggling to do certain things. I remember your series on German close air support and things like that,
mm-hmm.
where it was very enjoyable to listen to. I could put it on and just watch a whole bunch of them and be like, this is. It could be on in the background, and I'd be like, oh, I'm picking something up, and I could just have it on for quite a long time. So, no, it's something that I also strive for. That if I can talk for a while and people aren't getting bored, or people aren't trying to skip through, or if I can be pleasant to listen to, even if people weren't initially super interested in the topic, they'll still watch it, then obviously I'm doing something well. So that's the point I'd like to be at. And initially it was actually a point of I always had a problem with public speaking, so YouTube was sort of a way to train that into myself. I was constantly making content where I would be talking not to people directly, but talking in a way that I knew it was going to be seen by people. So it was a point of training myself to talk confidently, and hopefully I've got that down packed by now, because it's been going for 5 years. But it's still a work in progress.
No, I think it's huge how much of this YouTube gives you. Just yesterday, I had a phone call essentially from a friend who works for a sports nutrition company to do all these supplements, and they were looking for a person to just record a couple of TikToks with them, essentially looking for somebody with good English. And I showed up there, and I didn't do any prep work. I didn't even read the material, and they do all the setup, they put up the lights, and to me it was, it felt natural. It was just, it's a camera, there's a ring light, I got to speak a couple of lines, improvise, whatever. And as soon as I started, I looked around, everybody in the room was like, whoa, like where did that come from? How are you so natural? And it was like, to me, it felt almost like I'm not even at my peak. Like, I'm actually a little bit nervous. I made a couple of mistakes. It wasn't optimized, but I think, YouTube gets a bad rap from a lot of people. I think they look at YouTube as this sort of, it's like losers. You watch YouTube and it's little boys doing gaming videos, and I think a lot of the skill sets that come through just go unnoticed, because at the end of the day, the movie that you're watching on the big cinema screen was edited by somebody who very likely at some point started by editing YouTube videos and then worked his way up and eventually got into a big company. And I don't think that people realize just how much they can actually learn from it, and that it's not a waste of time, and that a lot of us have, also made friends, we've made money, we've made careers, some of them. I think that really does go unnoticed.
It's definitely something that, like I said, it was a way of training me to be able to speak confidently, and especially on the spot, which is something I'm still not particularly good with. I script a lot of the videos. At the very least, I will have a bunch of talking points and sort of work my way through them one by one. But it was a way of being able to train your voice to be very used to that, and speaking in a way that was easy to understand yet not boring and slow and over enunciative. It was That is a skill that, when you once you pick it up, it stays with you, and it can be very useful for a lot of different career paths. I've suggested to a lot of people, like, have you tried doing something on social media? Because not only is it good fun, you'll meet a lot of people, it might blow up and take you somewhere, but there's also a lot of skills to it, and not just as far as speaking, as well as far as editing the videos that I put together. Learning what works and what doesn't, and learning what and sort of seeing as well what other people are doing, and sort of realizing how I can incorporate different pieces from different other YouTube channels, and different styles that people have. There is a lot of, I mean, anything that work goes into is going to give you some sort of skill out of it in the end. But there's a lot on YouTube that lends itself to more serious, more professional endeavors as well. So yeah, it is very interesting in that regard.
I mean, regarding to actual video editing, I think it's one of the most missed out opportunities for people that want to make good money, because a lot of people are looking to outsource their video editing, right? And there's a huge shortage of people who are actually efficient, quick at putting together a nice video, and then extracting TikToks from it, adding all the captions, making it trailer-esque. I think for those of you who are listening to this or watching on YouTube, and you're looking to get start with some income, maybe you're in high school, you want to get a side hustle started, perhaps you don't have to be looking at, maybe I'm the next big YouTuber, but perhaps you could be the next big YouTuber's video editor, which is quite possibly the very much next best thing.
Yeah, it's I mean, eventually I will want to hire an editor myself. It's just part of the workload that takes a lot of time away, but it's also part of the workload that I, at the moment, quite enjoy doing. Once it can still be a little bit, not so much nerve-wracking, but just a little bit stressful to sit down and be like, right, I've got like 9 pages of a script here that I've got to kind of read out. Maybe some of it can go, maybe some of it needs a further explanation, but sitting down to record it can be a little bit stressful. But once it's all done, editing it together is it can be quite enjoyable, and especially working out how things are going to. I remember a couple of times with a War Thunder video, I accidentally cut a scene, or there was a big, I got a kill, or I was killed. There was a big explosion right on the beat of a soundtrack that I had in the background, and I was like, that's so cool. Like, it's just this tiny little thing that no one's going to notice, but like, I noticed it. It was good fun.
Yeah.
The first thing I'm looking at getting for YouTube is either looking at using some kind of AI to formulate a script for me, or getting someone to write a script, getting a research assistant, and maybe continuing to do the editing side of things myself. But eventually that will be a thing that I do. So, you can certainly do just that as a career, and make plenty out of it. It's not just, being the person behind the camera, or being the person who talks on the YouTube channel. There's especially when YouTube channels get quite big, there is a lot of work that goes into it. I mean, I know Linus Tech Tips has a whole office full of people. They've got half a dozen channels that they work on, but they've got like dozens of people who work on them, and it's a crazy amount of like logistics that goes into it in the end. When it gets to that size and it just keeps growing bigger and bigger, there's so many roles for people to do. There's plenty you can be good at and not have to be good at all of it.
Yeah.
Especially when you get to that stage.
Yeah. Because, for example, for me, editing's been the thing I never quite enjoyed. What I did enjoy was, because you're talking about getting a kill on the beat, it was making the kill montages. But that, again, people won't see the background of it, where let's say you want to have 50 kills in a video. That means you don't just go out there and get 50 kills. You have like, sometimes I had 150, 200 kills. They're spread out in different recordings, and you have to go and find them in each recording and put them all together, and you have to filter through them and say, okay, this is like a really good kill. Ooh, this is a long-range snipe. This one's kind of 50-50. I'll save it for later. And then you got to find the right song and get everything timed in. And for me, that portion was fun, but to go into some more complex video editing and adding captions over it and then finding some kind of outsourced material you're going to put over it, and to me, that portion I've never quite enjoyed. But I've also thought maybe it's because the workload wasn't optimized. And so I think as a YouTuber, you, like we spoke, you sort of pick up different skill sets, and naturally you're going to max out a couple of them. Some of them you're just going to be mediocre at. Some people will never be good at speaking. Some people will just never get their voice perhaps developed to the same level that we have. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm sure there's other skill sets they have within the YouTube environment that they can take to the absolute max, where we are going to be average at best.
I could think of an example of that. I said earlier about, as far as military content, if you ever hear someone using a text-to-speech voice to read the video, you can pretty much disregard what they're saying. But there's one example, I forget the name, I believe it's Dong Tren, he's, I believe, Chinese or Korean. He's got a very thick accent, and his English isn't particularly great, but he still makes relatively well-informed content. He just gets a speech editor to read it for him. And that's just a tool that he uses there. It's kind of the exception where he can be good at all the other stuff. And just because his English isn't quite up to par and his accent's quite thick, and people might not be willing to sit there and listen to it for a good amount of time or to absorb information that way, that's the way he's gotten around that. And yeah, you can, like I said, you can still be good at the other stuff and make plenty out of it,
Absolutely, yeah. Because, I mean, we could argue that he could go and create content for a long period of time and get rid of that thick accent, but that also means a lot of time spent where his content is probably going to be considered subpar. And so with a probably desire to grow his channel as fast as possible and get to a level where he can also make some money, this is the best possible solution.
It's a balancing act in the end, I think, where, it's always very good to be able to sit here and say, like, oh, money wasn't a part of it, I just really enjoyed what you're doing. But in the end, like, if you're gonna spend 6 hours a day on something, it's gotta make an income. Like, you've only got so many hours in the day. You gotta make money somehow. So, if it's very I don't know, virtue signally to be able to sit here and say, like, oh, I don't care about the money, I'm just doing it because I love what I'm doing. But like,
the equipment doesn't pay for itself.
Cha-ching, like, yeah, especially as I always started out when I started my YouTube channel, I said, look, I really do want this to be a career. I really think I can do it, It wasn't making money for quite a while. I had to have 1, 2, even 3 jobs on the side subsidizing, or at least part-time casual things that were making me some extra money whilst this was growing. But I always said from the beginning, like, I do want to earn an income out of this. That was one of the goals going into it from the beginning. It was never just a hobby. It was always a career to be. It would be really nice to be able to sit here and just be like, doesn't matter, I'm just gonna make whatever content I love to make, and if people don't watch it, it doesn't make any money, but it's we don't live in a perfect world. You've got to turn it into something or spend less time on it. So
no, there's always
I've been lucky that I've been able to do it.
It's either a monetary desire or a power desire. I mean, I never was able to make huge sums of money from YouTube specifically. Twitch was far better, but also far more inconsistent because you're relying on people, just donating loads of money. What I did enjoy was the sort of the power trip you got from being good at the game, but problem is that, again, might be one of the only skill sets that I picked up that has completely gone to waste. Like, I cannot utilize the skill of my mouse and keyboard in a video game anywhere else. It's your voice you can take over, your editing skills, your research, battle ratings. Yeah, that one's gone. I know now a lot about history, sure, but so much of it I think is unfortunately not utilizable in everyday life scenarios.
Well, that's one of the things I said with War Thunder, the kind of content that you, for example, used to make. I don't think would work in the current community of War Thunder. Like, even if you were still a War Thunder YouTuber, I don't think it would work anymore. People just don't look for content like that. And for ages, I tried to make like, maybe I can do something similar, because I one of the things I said was that it feels like people in general aren't trying as hard anymore,
Hmm.
and yeah, people were just like, yeah, yeah, it's not interesting, don't care. Like, yeah, sure, I could do things better, or learn this specific new tactic or specific new way of playing a certain vehicle, or structuring lineups or whatever you had to say. But it was like, yeah, I could just watch 3 YouTube shorts and just fuck around instead. Like it wasn't even that is something that is not so much a skill you can take around. So it's I was very lucky that I didn't end up just falling into that and could do something else with it. But now it's very much an intentional thing. Like, this can't be it. Like, you've
Hmm.
got to be able to take it somewhere else just in case you need to. And yeah, I've been able to do it. So that's I the content I'm making now, the research side of things and the just general nerding about it isn't going to last forever itself either. But if there's somewhere else it can go when it needs to, then we're all good.
No, I think you're absolutely correct. And I'm very happy for you because it was 2017 where I quit for the first time, or rather, like that was the first time I really had a mental switch or something. Was like, dude, this is not healthy. Because, and I think this is, you know, a root of a far deeper problem that goes beyond War Thunder. I think I started to see what Gaijin was doing with War Thunder. I'm starting to see patterns of it in real life with if it's government, if it's certain companies, but also the mentality of people. There's ever since I say I killed off my channel this year. I don't really care. The content I'm creating is more or less for me, with the exception of these podcasts. These podcasts are meant for people. I hope they get information from here. They get to meet, you as a content creator, also a bit more personally. But the content I have been uploading on a weekly basis has been sort of a guideline for me. And what I find so heartwarming is the couple of people that do watch them with sincere interest and find the information useful, because it reminds me of those days of War Thunder where I think my mental point of origin was sort of get good. It was this, you are the problem, not the game. You're the problem, not the enemy player. You're the problem, not Russian bias. It's you doing something wrong, and until you correct everything in your power to get better, I'm not going to even be willing to discuss that there is some sort of bias going on. And I think this, this thing with shorts and with this attention span it's growing into other aspects where people are not willing to really work for anything. There's this sort of
Mm.
waiting for things to happen, and then
That's one of the things I was going to say. When I saw YouTube Shorts start to become like a really big thing that they were pushing majorly, it made me just honestly super depressed. It was like,
mm,
everyone's attention span is 60 seconds long now. Like, if if you can't deliver everything, I mean, even now I see people commenting under YouTube Shorts saying like, oh, you could have talked about this way quicker. Oh, this is too much rambling. You're like, it's 60 seconds long, dude. Like, come on.
yeah,
But no, one of the things I said a while back, and it was actually relatively unpopular. I didn't expect it to be, but what I said was, if you want to get better at something, and you're finding that you're failing for whatever reason, the first thing you do is blame yourself. So for War Thunder, for example, I said, like, if you die or if you lose a match, the first thing you start by saying is, we lost this match because I didn't do this, or because
mm,
I did this wrong. And only when you try and fit a reason why it was your fault, because that's something you can change. That's something you can look at, okay, well, how could I have anticipated that? How could I get around that next time? And then that's knowledge that will help you get better. And
mhm.
nowadays that's seen as try harding, or that's seen as being a sweat lord. It's like, but it's like only when you've exhausted every opportunity to try and blame yourself for something, then you can start looking at, okay, that vehicle's overpowered, or this team was super shit, or Russian bias, or whatever it is. Like,
Mm.
find a way to blame yourself first, and only when you can't, you start excusing it and putting on something else. Because if it's Russian bias, or if it's just packet loss, it's just this overpowered vehicle. Well, there's nothing you can do about that, so you might as well shut up.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't help. And that's something I think you can use in more than just, say, a video game. Like I try and use that when I'm looking at, with YouTube channels, with YouTube content as well. I look at, oh, well, this didn't work. Not because I'm just unlucky, or the algorithm just didn't like me today, or oh, someone else just uploaded a similar video and that got really popular and mine no one cared about. But if you can look for, well, I screwed up. Well, I could have done something differently. Then that's something you can learn from. So that's YouTube, like YouTube Shorts, and some of the things Gaijin did with War Thunder. I made a joke in a video that I think Gaijin's ideal map for War Thunder would be just a flat grid, where there's no terrain, there's no positions people can use, there's no strategic benefit to any. You can't put a tactical thought into it. You just run around like a headless chicken, and try and do whatever, shoot whatever pops out in front of you, and it certainly seems like that's the way things are going, especially with some of the changes they're still making. It's like it's the mixture of that and attention spans being shorter than ever, and a lot of other aspects of life sort of facilitating that, and allowing that to still be successful. That people don't want to change that. People want everything very quickly. People want everything very I don't want to say easily, but people do sort of want a lot more than, like a lot of things take a bit of time and then it starts coming easily, but they don't want that initial investment first. Like, it's going to struggle for a bit and then will be really good, really easy, really enjoyable. I mean, people like yourself and a lot of the higher players in War Thunder back in 2016-17 made the game look really easy. And it wasn't. Like, you had to put a lot of practice into it first, and then it is really fun and really successful, and you rack up 14, 15 kill games on the daily, and it's quite enjoyable. But that first bit, people don't want to see that bit. That's inconvenient. And YouTube Shorts and TikTok and that side of social media sort of plays into that. And when I saw that starting to happen, I thought YouTube was sort of the last vestige of, well, it's not going to go into that side of things. And then they've made Shorts one of the biggest parts of the platform. It's like, oh, shit. Okay. Like, I haven't tried to make much in the way of YouTube Shorts. I haven't bothered looking at TikTok even slightly. It just doesn't interest me. I'm known as the guy who rambles. So trying to fit things into short form content has never been what I'm known for or what I want to be known for. But like, it's at the point where it would be more successful. Like, I would be a much bigger channel than I am today if I had just shoved out loads of shorts. And I've considered it, but it just wasn't enjoyable. I can't sit there and go, hold on a second, that actually reminds me, that's quite cool, we can talk about this. But I can't do it. I'm not very good at it, and I didn't like it. So even if it would be more successful, I've sort of tried to steer away from that and kind of direct my own viewers away from it. Like, hold on, this is going to take a while to explain, but hopefully you enjoy it in the aftermath, and a lot of people do. So that side of things is definitely where I prefer to stay, and I wish it was more of the accepted thing still, like it was 5-6 years ago. But yeah, like I said, attention spans are lower than ever these days. It certainly seems that way, even if it might not be for a lot of people. But it's unfortunate, Arthur, I think.
No, I think it's. I myself have struggled with. I've never had TikTok, but I use Instagram on a daily, and I noticed that one of the main forms of communication with people from all around the world is that people just send each other reels, and so even if I don't want to consume TikTok content, I'm now essentially forced, in a way, to open up and, oh, what does this guy send me? Oh, cute cat video. And then you have to go and open it and like it so they know you've seen it. And I find it just so, it's essentially the most toxic thing that we've ever developed. There is some goodness to it. I think there are definitely good TikToks out there. There's some good funny ones, like in the sense like Vine videos used to be. You've got some informative ones, educational ones. Maybe it's a funny clip from a podcast. Like somebody's like, oh wow, now I really want to watch this entire podcast. But most people, they'll see the clip and think, oh, this would be really nice to they're already swiping to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And you know, it ties into everything. I started reading books, I want to say 6 months ago, and I've read more books than I've read in the last 15 years, and I feel overtly proud of it, and at the same time, I think if I looked at myself objectively, I should be able to say, what the fuck, that's something you should be doing on a regular basis anyways.
Yeah.
So I take it you don't have TikTok, you don't use it, you don't have any interest in being part of it? And
not really. I thought about it. I heard that War Thunder was actually, you know, quite successful on TikTok apparently. I was like, maybe I should get into it. And shorts came over to YouTube, and I was like, I already don't like this. Like, TikTok is just that. Like, I'm not gonna, no, that's killed it for me. But like you said, there are certainly people who use it and who are quite good with it, and there are people who use it to make these skits where the fact that it is very quick, very immediate is part of the comedy behind it. But when it's just make the same videos it would be making but really fast, I don't like it. You know, it's something that makes me feel like it's not something. Like, how can you enjoy making something that's only 35 seconds long? Like, there's not a lot to take out of it. You know, there's not. I mean, there's certainly still a skill to editing together a funny, you know, reel or TikTok or what have you. Forgive me, I do need to let a kitten into the room.
I was going to ask you about that also. I've been watching that beautiful kitten box in the back there. Also the piano, the Messerschmitt, and something else which I can't quite identify on the left-hand side. Is it a German plane?
That is a model Bristol Beaufighter.
Ah, man, the Beaufighter really... When I hear the words Beaufighter, it takes me back to arcade days and patch 1.23 of War Thunder. Absolutely gorgeous. That plane was very much fun to fly, you know, very aggressive. That's a very beautiful kitten.
I remember that was one of the planes that actually got me into War Thunder.
Really?
To begin with. I was watching a Kerbal Space Program YouTuber by the name of Robaz. And he played War Thunder like once or twice for videos, and I happened to see it. And it was a video on the Beaufighter that he was playing, and it looked really cool. It was this, you know, I knew pretty much nothing about military technology at the time. I logged into War Thunder. I didn't even know that like every single one of these vehicles is a real vehicle. Half of them could have been made up. I wouldn't have known. But the Beaufighter looked like this big imposing thing compared to these little single engine fighters. I was like, oh, that's really cool. You know, it's full of 20mm cannons. Like, I want to play that.
Yeah.
And that was probably early 2014. Like the game was still new then. I don't think tanks were a thing. You know, it was very early on. But yeah, that's one of the things. It wasn't anything to do with that. That was a gift from my partner years ago. And yeah, it just happened to be like we were actually trying to identify what it is because it's not quite accurate to the real thing. It was in this like little garden shop, as it was just like RAF plane, and we were like, oh, what is this supposed to be? And we looked at the rockets under the wings and the nose cone, and we're like, I think that's actually meant to be a Beaufighter. That's very cool. But yeah, there's a few models up there. I keep meaning to get some shelving set up on the wall behind me, and ideally have it in a camera shot so I can display stuff properly. But at the moment, there's a couple of pins that I got from military expos that I've been to. There's a model Sherman over there. There's the Lego Messerschmitt, and yeah, there's the Beaufighter that was the first one. I've got a bunch in front of me here as well. But yeah, eventually it will all be displayed. It's quite a fun thing to collect. I picked up a few because I went to the UK recently, toured around a bunch of museums, and got a couple of bits and pieces there. I still haven't put any of that footage on YouTube, besides in one of the last videos where it was just background stuff. But that's yeah, it's quite fun collecting bits and pieces like that and being able to talk about them.
Yeah, it really takes me back. I remember once being a little kid building those planes before I even knew anything about planes. And then once you get into War Thunder, it's sort of, wow, wait a minute, I've seen this before. It's like, oh, that was that model of a plane that my granddad got me, and it was on my shelf, and then I stepped on it and broke it, and it's in the trash now. But it's the memory stays, and nostalgia, and we learn quite a lot about. I think that's one of the good parts of War Thunder is that regardless of it being a game, and we can talk about how gaming is, you know, some aspects for some people really bad, but War Thunder, luckily enough, is based on reality, and so what you and I and thousands of others have learned is a big portion of history, and we're taking that with us, and a very
Mm.
important part of
Mm.
history at that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, when I started out, when I first started playing War Thunder, I was about 15, 16 years old. I didn't know really anything about military tech at the time. It was always a bit of like, oh, no, that's cool, big plane, go fast, do lots of boom. But other than that, like, I didn't really know much about it. And then as I came into War Thunder, it became more of an interest. And specifically, as I made a couple of videos about vehicles and got stuff wrong, and people came out and corrected me on it. And that kind of started an interest in it, and now I've been able to take it somewhere, which is very, very cool. Um, but it's also still just a lot of fun to learn new things. I mean, recently one of the things I said after covering this in the ArmourCast channel once, I said I am never touching Chinese military tech ever again, because they keep things very tight-lipped as far as information on their tanks and radar systems and specifically like anti-aircraft systems and missiles and what have you. I was like, I am never touching this again because there is so much misinformation out there, and the actual official stuff is just full of holes. But I still do. Like, I still look into it now. I'm just like, damn it, I want to know more about that. And so I spend ages looking into it, which all kind of started from that.
I was going to ask you, out of all the vehicles in War Thunder, which one would you say is your favourite?
It really depends what I'm feeling at the time. I love sort of the. I've been really getting into simulator battles recently because I feel like with the modern era jets, that's kind of where they shine. When you're looking at air-to-air missiles fighting from miles away, you don't really need that kind of third-person situational awareness to dogfight effectively. Meanwhile, being in the cockpit, it feels very different. But yeah, sort of that modern era of aircraft and sort of a lot of the I talked about the sort of really light, nimble these little vehicles. They would have made no sense back in the War Thunder of 2015-16. But they're just equipped with little autocannons. There's like 25, 30 millimeter cannons, like top battle rating, where they're fighting these modern MBTs. They don't look like they make much sense, but they're so much fun. Um, but as far as like a personal interest has gone, I really do love looking at anti-air systems and like air defense systems, especially the big like truck-based surface-to-air missiles. Um, which is one of the reasons I kind of like. I'm absolutely shit at DCS, but I love watching content of DCS because they've got these big sort of more strategic level, like country level air defense systems. They're very, very cool. And these whole batteries of trucks set up with radars and command posts and these huge like telegraph poles of missiles. And they're very, very cool. I do love looking into them. So that's one of the personal interests. I've joked a couple of times that like, oh, we should get that in War Thunder, but it would never work. I can dream. But no, they're quite cool.
I've got one more question that's popped into my head before we wrap it all up, and that's in terms of games. Do you play any other games? And could you give me your favorite game of all time? And if it is War Thunder, I would be surprised or offended. But is there perhaps another game that in your past has sort of given you the sort of nostalgic feeling where you just feel like, oh damn, I'd love to just press a button, go back to that age where I was like 12, and you open up that.
When I first started getting into Skyrim, and that side of fantasy, like I'd played a bit of Assassin's Creed. My favorite game at the time was Monster Hunter Tri, which was this fantasy. It was like a JRPG game. I still love it. I still sort of go back and watch, like occasionally I'll watch an old YouTube video. I was like, I remember watching this when it was brand new to me. And when I first got into Skyrim, and it felt like this huge expansive world where you could kind of do whatever, you'd probably have the same with RuneScape. And it's this, you can sort of build whatever character you want, and that kind of the freedom that this medieval fantasy world kind of gives you. Very, very cool. It's still, I would say it's up there as probably one of my favorite games of all time. Um, I haven't been playing much else recently because I just haven't had the time. I've been working on a couple of things, one of which I can't really talk about yet. But it's sort of a bigger project that's taken a lot of time. And then working on YouTube videos. I've been away with family I was away for over a month. and doing a lot of filming for YouTube videos that have supposed to have come out already and are still being worked on. But uh, I haven't had much time to just sit down and play games that aren't War Thunder, because also I quit the War Thunder partnership program.
Ah,
Um, because Gaijin were doing a bunch of things, and I was like, I'm not okay with this. Like, I don't want to be affiliated with this. And all of a sudden, the partnership program was giving me, uh, I think it was 25,000 golden
hmm,
eagles a month to just use however I wanted to. And I could ask for a couple of vehicles. I could ask for like rental periods and vehicles if I wanted to make a video on them. Something that new that had just come out, or something that I'd sort of never really grinded that line and sort of was miles away from. Well, now it's like if I want that, I've got to do it all myself. So I said on Twitter recently, it's like realizing how much grinding is involved in this game when you don't have that extra stream coming in. So I haven't
yes.
had much time to just sit down and play without it being War Thunder, because I'm now all of a sudden without that little extra stepping stone to use. But no, there's still a few. Still jump into like a lot of old games. I played this old game called Transport Fever, which is like a tycoon game. You build
Mhm.
like train networks and bus and truck networks between, you sort of cart materials around to provide them to different towns, and ferry passengers town to town. And as you sort of build up the networks, the cities grow and more people use them, and you have to replace them with newer vehicles. And similar to War Thunder, you sort of work your way through time,
Hmm.
as you start out in sort of the 19th century with like the really old trains and sort of steam trams and things like that, and you work your way up to sort of modern trucks and trains and stuff like that. And that I can waste a day doing sometimes. But yeah, I don't play much that isn't War Thunder now. I never really did much with like first person shooter games. I was never very good at them. I live in Australia. Ping is a huge problem. And if it's not like, I was always really into Halo, because that was a bit more fantasy esque.
Hmm.
But like CS:GO, I played for about 3 days. I was like, this is the most boring fucking thing in the world. Like, I don't know what all the fuss is about from this game. I never wanted to touch that again. I
Me
was like,
neither.
I played it for about an hour, and I was like, I don't think this is for me. Maybe I'll stick with it a little bit because I might just be shit. But I kind of learned some of the spots on the maps where people would snipe you from, and I was like, yeah, this ain't it, chief. Like, one of the things I've talked about with War Thunder is people talk about passive campers and whatever. I was like, they're tanks. That's
Yes.
the point.
Yes.
Like, they're not machine gunners in Call of Duty running around with AKs and M4s.
Mm.
Like, they're tanks. They're big, heavy. They take a long time to traverse turrets around, and they're meant to be a bit more tactical about it. But yeah, the first person shooters were never my thing. Fantasy games I always really enjoyed, and yeah, history stuff, real life stuff. I mean, like I said, I want to get more into DCS, but I'm just really crap at it. And it's like the kind of game you have to study before you're any good at it. So I just haven't had the time. But yeah, beyond that's kind of where it ends for me at the moment with video games, which is not something I ever thought I'd say. I was always, on team like people who were like, "Oh, they're for kids." I was like, "No, shut the fuck up!" Like, video games can be more serious than that, or at
Yeah.
least more. There's like a skill to esports level games,
Mm.
and there's flight simulators that are really intriguing. They're more for adults to enjoy, and but now I sit there thinking about new Assassin's Creed or what have you. I'm just like, can't really be bothered.
Yeah.
I would have when I was 15, but I just eh,
Yeah, but also when you were
got more important
15, the
things to do.
Assassin's Creed
Like,
that came out was going to be good. The story was going to be good. The gameplay was going to be good.
I haven't played any of them since the fourth one, or the Pirates one.
Yeah, Black
Um,
Flag for me was the best they've ever made, and everything afterwards was just so disappointing.
I never even looked at them, and I was sort of War Thunder took over because I was making something out of
Mm.
it. But also, it's just like I just lost that interest in the more just a video game. Like, I like War Thunder because there's a community around it that you can chat to, and then you go and fight them in a battle, and you see how they play and how you play, and every game's different. Whereas just a video game now, I do kind of treat as like, it's kind of, I would have enjoyed it years ago, but
Mm.
I've got more important things to work on now. Like, I I didn't think I'd get to that point where video games were like something I was cynical about, but it kind of has gotten to that point now where it's like, yeah, I'd like to. Whereas previously I'd be like, oh, I really want to get home from this thing so I can sit down and play some
Yeah,
Skyrim.
yeah.
But now it's like I'd really love to just go and like have a picnic sitting by the river, and that's video games are just like a bit like, yeah, okay, sitting in front of a screen clicking elites in Halo all day. Like it's really really fun when you switch off your brain and let that
Yes.
kid part of your brain take over. But that only lasts so long, and it's I play that for a few days and be like, that was fun. Back to work.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't play much anymore.
We've gotten old. We've gotten old.
I have now. I said it was funny. I said in a video recently, like I hit the ripe old age of 26, which sounds like nothing. But then there were a bunch of people being like, "Oh, that's nothing. Let me know when you hit 40." And I was like, "That's terrifying." And then there were a bunch of people being like, "Oh, I thought you were, like 16, 17, because half my Discord I've realized is like under the age of 18." I've been like,
Yes.
didn't know that. Like you guys are all children. But no, it's we're not like gotten to the point where we're getting old now, but we're sort of out of that kid stage that you looked at when you were 12, 13, 14, and we're like, that's where I want to be. And we're now like, I've passed it now. Like
It takes us a bit longer, men, because we don't have that biological clock of our body saying every month, once a month, like, babies, give me babies. But eventually it knocks you on the head, and it's sort of, you start thinking about, I got to start laying a foundation, I got to start getting myself set up, I got to start financially investing, I got to start doing things that are actually going to be beneficial in the long run. And when it comes to video games, very, very few sort of trajectories within video games are going to bring you that for a long period of time. So that's why I'm very happy.
I was lucky enough to be able to make content out of War Thunder, and there's not many games where you could make that kind of content and have it last for any length of time. I said recently, like, War Thunder's become all about what's coming next. Like, no one gives a shit about what vehicles are in the game. They give a shit about what's coming next update. And it's like, the update won't even be here yet, and people are talking about, well, what's next time? What's coming next? It's like, luckily, I can make content about that because I'm a massive military nerd. But, couldn't do that with any of the other games I was playing at the time, and I just don't touch them anymore. Like, they weren't doing anything for me. They were fun, but you can't waste time all day.
No, and I was going to say this, with most of the games that have come out in the past couple of years, it feels like they're a chore. They're all these side quests that they sort of pamper in with the idea that it's going to add some value, and really all it does is add minutes to the total playtime without really adding to the full length of the story. And I miss the linearity of games. I miss the games where you didn't really have to think to not get lost. You didn't have to think about what abilities you were going to upgrade. There was just like the old Assassin's Creed. It was an idiot, a trained monkey could play through the game. And nowadays you have to sort of sit down and make a spreadsheet of, okay, if I do this ability, and it's sad to see games go that way. And for me, everything since The Witcher 3, which for me is the greatest game they've ever created, has sort of been just a massive disappointment. And I think I'm happy for it. Cynical as it might sound, is because if games were
It gives
getting
you an excuse to drop it.
Yes, because if games were getting progressively better, then I would sort of be inclined to want to go back into it. But this way, I know that they're going to make one good game every maybe 10 years, and I'll go in, I'll play it. Because playing through, let's say, The Witcher 3, it's, I think, the same time as if you watch Game of Thrones from first to last episode. So I consider it an investment in that regard. But they're rare and far in between.
Yeah, no, it feels like every video game's got some gimmick that you can pay your way past now. Like, it's there's all these you might screw off your character by going down the wrong training line or something.
Yes.
It's like, well, you can pay to bring it back.
Yeah.
Great. We used to buy a game and have it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where's that gone?
Yeah, and you used to get punished for being bad, and I think that's what's gone away. Not just in video games, but I think in real life, in a way. Like, we've stopped punishing people for making, not necessarily mistakes, but like really poorly made choices in their lives, and sort of perpetuating this I almost want to say idiocracy, I mean as its sirens, but like there has to be some cruelness to the world because we do live in nature, right? And nature's going to show her teeth, and we're all going to be, turned to dust in a couple of millennia. So,
Mm.
yeah. Well, to
Yeah,
not
see,
end.
I've always. Oh,
No,
yeah,
no,
go ahead.
go on, go on.
See, I was gonna say I've always held to the idea that like a positive reinforcement beats a negative punishment,
Hmm.
but you still have to be enticed to put some effort in,
Yes.
because it is hard work. Like things are gonna be hard work throughout life. Like you need that sort of um. It's nice sometimes to have a time limit on a project so
Hmm.
that it's like it's gotta get done. I can't just sit here procrastinating forever. Like I could, but I will be in trouble later down the line if I don't get something done. And that's one of the things I like about YouTube specifically, as opposed to like a regular job, is like if I don't work, I don't get paid.
Yeah.
So it's like there is no noping out. Like there is
There's a
no
risk
like
back there that.
it's like I've been able to get to the point where the channel's grown to the point where if I don't upload anything for a month, I still earn enough to get by. But
Mhm.
then it's like gotta knuckle down and get back to work now,
Yes.
because if you don't do it, it doesn't do anything for you. Like there is a worry factor there. There is something that you have to avoid and something that you have to work to. There's a bit of structure there, and I think that's a good thing. I think and I've to tie it back to War Thunder. It's like it seems like they want to remove the punishment for screwing up, and also to balance that, lop off the top end where you're not rewarded for being exceptional. Like because that would make the noob feel like they're not, they've got to put effort in, and people want everything really quickly. People want the fun bit before the work. So I mean, it's a video game, fair enough, but at the end of the day, you still should try and put some effort into things, and especially in more serious parts of life. Like
As you're
you
saying these
can't
words, that
you can't step past it.
what's popped into my head is generation average. Because back when I was still playing, I was crowned the average whatever, and I thought to myself, well, if I'm average at everything, I'm actually pretty good. But what you're describing is this idea that everybody gets sort of squished. It's I don't want to say it's a communist way of looking at things, right? But everybody has equal, everybody's equally good, but that also means everybody's equally bad, which I think is not where you want to be. Like you're gonna have people that are bad at the game because they've just started, or they're just plain bad, and you're gonna have people who are good at the game because either they're naturals or they've put a lot of effort into it, and it's good that way, and
Mm.
life works
And,
pretty similarly, right?
and it also gives people more room to be good at specific things. So it's not
Mhm.
like being bad at a video game is detrimental to you as a person. Like it's
Yeah.
not. If I'm like, you're a noob, you need to get good. That doesn't. I'm not calling you a bad person.
Yes.
Like there is something that you got to do here. Maybe you would have a better time if you did. Like it's not like you don't want a situation where everyone, like, no one really has to put in any effort and they'll still be at a level, and to balance that out, no one really gets rewarded for being too exceptional, because then they'd be try harding. Like it gives room for people to be, I guess, different, but also to be more uh, uh, like uniquely what they've chosen to put their time in, and how they can then
Mhm.
put that out to other people. Um, which I guess is the YouTuber talking, because like most people just wouldn't have that voice to communicate it with people. But no, I always said, for example, when I started making YouTube content, like I want to help people who aren't as good as me,
Mhm.
but there are also still a buttload of people who are a lot better than me. So I'm still working, and as I get better at certain things, I can then put it on to other people. And I'm a big fan of the idea that the best way to learn something is by teaching it to someone else. Like it's a very common piece of advice. Like if you want to get better at something, start having someone rely on you to teach them
Yes.
about it,
Yes.
because
This is so
it,
true.
it it's a really useful, and it helps you phrase sort of, it helps you realize where you might have a couple of holes,
Mhm.
um and gives you something to work for, because eventually they're going to catch up to you. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun having room to be better at a certain thing, and for life and in general, is having things you can excel at, even if you don't to begin with, even if it sucks to suck at something. but like it gives you something to work towards. That's a good thing.
Yeah. There's this hypocrisy surrounding this idea of when you're teaching somebody something or trying to, another person will observe it and say, well, but why should they listen to you when you've clearly not done all of it? You're not at the top yourself. And I think to myself, well, if I was at the top, I probably wouldn't be teaching. That's the first thing, because you've ascended beyond something. You're not going to have the best basketball player teach somebody who's just started, because that's not his thing. He's at the top of his game. He's going to be in the ring or on the playing field or whatever. It's exactly as you say. You go through the process and you're trying to sort of filter your own thoughts and your mental story and what you're trying to frame, and you're also learning from that person that you're giving that information to, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a very beautiful thing.
So also, like, everyone will find a slightly different angle to look at things than you do. So it's like when you sort of bring them up to your level, it's like they can then give you something as well. Like even if you're teaching them to do something, they might make you think like, I hadn't considered that. That's a cool thing. Maybe I should look more into that. Like you pick things up from everywhere, and I don't think you need to be a major authority on something to talk about it. It's at least worth knowing when, like, this is not my area of expertise, take it with a grain of salt. But beyond that, it's like it's still good to get something from everywhere about it. As far as I've talked on the ArmourCast channel about like how look, I'm not a military veteran. I am not a defense analyst. Technically, I could call myself a defense analyst. It's actually not a legally protected term, at least not in most countries. But I don't want to mislead people. Like, I am an enthusiast who's done a bit of research and is putting it forward to you guys. Take it with a grain of salt. But that doesn't mean that, like, I shouldn't talk about that, because there is still a lot to say about it. There's room for everyone to have their say, I think, is the easiest way of putting that out. Like, you don't have to be the authority on something to talk about it with any level of confidence. And like, I'm sure you would say as well with War Thunder back in the day, like there were plenty of people who were better, but like maybe they aren't making YouTube videos. Yeah. So like there's room. It's good to have as many people putting that out as possible, and eventually the bad ones will get weeded out anyway. So What's the difference?
I'm a huge proponent of this freedom of speech, and well, in regards to me in the past, I was on the very extreme end. I'm very much aware of it now. I still am quite opinionated. I do think that character that I created, which was different from who I am in person, maybe was a very accentuated version of it, right? But I don't think you can create a character that's a complete opposite of what you are.
It's entirely false, yeah.
So, in fact, what I was going to do is, I do this at the end of every episode. I like to give the final question to the person I'm talking to, and you can ask me anything whatsoever you want. Anything from the top of your head that sort of tingles your thought process?
Oh, I wonder if the conversation was going to go here in the first place. You said in a previous video something that I've been thinking about sort of since then, the back of my mind, and you said something along the lines of, when it comes to politics or when it comes to social, like, opinionated things, people are afraid to be extremists. People want to sit on the fence. Whereas me personally, politically, I count myself as relatively centrist. But I don't do that because I'm sitting on the fence. Like, I will vehemently sort of defend my place at the table and talk about how I feel about something. Like, personally, I see extremism as the problem. Like, what would you... I guess, is there a solution to that? Like, what would you say is the best way to avoid, like, both sitting on the fence, but also being extremely one side or the other and being divisive about that? Like, where's the ground that you think is best for people to sit?
That's a really good question. For most of my life, I thought I was a lot of things. I thought I was a agnostic. I thought I was a full liberal. I thought I was open to everything and everything and whatever. But as I've grown up, I've actually realized I'm quite religious in some weird way, and I'm extremely right-wing with a lot of opinions, with what's going on in the world. And what I find on the fence for me is that quote from Episode 3 of Star Wars. where I think it was Obi-Wan who says, only Siths deal with absolutes. And I try to think of it in this polarizing way where I'm inclined to objectively agree with you. It would be better if you were all sort of in the middle somewhere, right? Trying to be as neutral as possible. But I've always used this example when it comes to, and I hate mentioning the LGBT stuff, but if on one end you have the complete liberal side of you and you say anybody can choose whatever gender they want, anybody can choose whatever pronouns and stuff like that, then I'm inclined to think that in order for this equation to function, we have to also allow the most hardcore, racist, KKK-loving redneck to have his say. Because if you're going to mute him, then you would also have to mute the other extreme. And I don't know if there is a solution per se. Because if you asked me, I was talking about when it comes to politics to a friend, he said, I think it was actually a woman, she was really offended by what I said, but I said to her question, which was, what do you think would be the optimal political sort of standpoint? I said, a benevolent dictator. Essentially one person who's in charge of the entire world, but he's doing it for the benefit of the world. And
it's sort of a utopic thing.
It is extremely utopic.
In an ideal sense, it would actually. See, it's kind of like I try and go into a lot of things neutral, but I come out of very, very few things neutral.
Mm-hmm.
There's always an opinion formed somewhere along the way, and sort of standing on one side of the fence or the other. But I completely get you when you're like, if you were to allow everything, you have to think about like you're allowing the abuse of that thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't just go fully one side or the other.
Maybe think of it this way: if I'm sitting at the extreme end, let's say on the right, and you're sitting, quote unquote, on the fence in the middle, as you said, you tend to start in the neutral position, but you get pulled a little bit to one side depending on who you're talking to. Now, if I'm too extreme, you might start going in the opposite direction. You go a little bit more liberal, but chances are my strong opinions and argument hopefully will pull you a little bit closer, but also your reasoning and level-headedness will pull me a little bit closer. So in a way, we are meeting in the middle, which creates a new extreme, but that extreme is now significantly less than the actual big portion of the scale, right? So maybe that's the sensible thing. But I like extremes because for me, I found that it's easier to live life if I put myself on one side or the other because I don't have to think about it. In my case, I generally try not to care. So I try not to care if I'm going to offend somebody. I try not to care if I'm being a little bit too edgy. If like the girl I'm on a date with just going to walk away because I said something that's on the wrong lines. I'd rather be myself, hardcore authentically, and offend some people and risk offending many than to be too neutral and perhaps risk out a good debate. Because what I've realized is I love debating so much, and what I see for the future of this podcast is that you people as guests who you and I are talking today for the first time, hopefully we'll talk many more, and each time we can dwell into a topic that is slightly more touchy and we can challenge each other's viewpoints, right? Because at the very end here, you have actually challenged me in a very nice way, and I love that because you have a point of view and I have a point of view, and we're trying to find if there is a middle ground where we agree, and if that middle ground is healthy for the world, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I hold to this one view when I look at any issue, and for example, I'll use the example of propaganda about the Russia-Ukraine war.
Mm-hmm.
I don't blame Russian people for falling for it, because I hold to the idea going into everything that people, by and large, make sense. And people are pretty much all the same. Whether you're hardcore left-wing or hardcore right-wing, somewhere in the middle, really doesn't matter. We all do the same thing, right? And that is that we look at the information that is there. Some of us are better at going looking for it. Some of us prefer to have it find us. But we look at the information, we react to that information, and we form opinions based on what we know.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to the propaganda about like anti-Ukraine and anti-the West in this conflict, there's a lot of Russian people who believe it. I've been very, very outwardly pro-Ukraine in this situation, mainly because I don't have any specific love for Ukraine. I just think they were the ones who were invaded, and I decided, what I'm looking at the information I'm looking at, this is what sits right with me. But I don't think Russian people are some bloodthirsty monster or something.
Hmm.
Like, they are doing the same thing that I'm doing. They're looking at the information they've got in front of them, forming their opinions and voicing those opinions and seeing how people react and continuing along down those lines. Like, the problem is the media narrative in Russia is very controlled, but beyond that, people all do the same thing. Whether you're on one side of the debate or the other, people do the same thing. They take the information and they put out in return. So looking at every issue in that way is, I think, what leads to me being very in the middle on a lot of things. Like, I know a lot of right wingers would say, "Oh, I'm a crazy liberal" or whatever, and a lot of left wingers would say, "Oh, you're not, you're offensive or not sticking up, or you're sitting on the fence or whatever." But like I said, I will defend my viewpoint on an issue without being extremely for one side or the other,
Mm.
because I think that people, by and large, are all pretty much the same. Like, we all do the same things. We all, laugh slightly too loudly at a joke, or sing in the shower when we think no one's listening, or come home from work and bitch about an ex, or a co-worker that we pretend we really like in real life, but then we come home and we're
Yeah,
like, God, fuck that person. But like we all do the same shit. People aren't that different.
we have the same
So I
programming.
I don't think that being too extremely for one side or the other is healthy, in the regard that, like, it asks you to see other people or the other side of the debate, regardless of who that other side is, as being so majorly different from you, when they're probably not. They probably looked at one key piece of information that they reacted slightly differently to you did, and
Mm.
then you diverged from there. But we all start at the same place. Like, we all. There's a comedian that I like called Randy Feltface. I'm going to see him next month. And he said, it's like every morning you wake up and it's like, what's your fully formed opinion on this incredibly complex social issue that you just learned about 5 minutes ago? You quit typing into your phone so the
Mm.
rest of us can tell you to fuck off and die. Like, you sort of can't win. Like, but everyone's expected to have an opinion, and we all probably started out in the same place, which was relatively clueless and just grasping at information.
Mm.
So when you look at things like that, it's like no one, even the far other side of the issue, can really be that different from you. Like, how did they get there? And in another world, I probably would have been there myself, or I would have been on that side, or what have you.
Mm.
So
I
that's the
think
way I try and look at things.
the more I'm thinking about it now, I think ultimately we're all sitting on the fence in a way where, if I consider myself for a moment as an extreme right wing, and I was to have a healthy conversation with an extreme leftist, with good arguments, I think there's a very good chance that I'm going to fully agree with some of the things that person believes, and they're going to fully agree with some things that I believe. And so in some way, we're going to be meeting in the middle. And I think when you level that out, you do get some a general curve, essentially, which most of us are, like you said, pretty much the same. But yeah, we're drawn to the extremes. We're drawn to hardcore opinions. We're drawn to drama. We're drawn to all these things. Back in the
Makes
day
very
when
clean boundaries, at least. Like,
yeah,
when there's a very clean line you can draw, it's very easy to separate in your head. But
I mean, the world's become a very big globalized village, and we're quite curious about what the neighbour's doing, and now it's moved on to what was the next country doing, was the next continent doing, and I think what we should probably do is just people should go and live on a deserted island somewhere for a month, and they'll realize, you don't have to know about everything, and perhaps this filtering, which I see now you're personally extremely good at, with the filtering of information. I would like to think I'm good at it, but I'm probably quite biased, and most people are extremely biased at the way they take information. And also we choose different sources, and I trust this guy, but that guy's a liar and he's bullshitting. And then that's how War Thunder we had those armies. Doom Army happened because I would say something and people would just blindly believe you. And if you say it in a
it's
convincing
like
way,
I
that
said, in a recent video, I said everyone always says, "Oh, I was kicked from this person's Discord for literally nothing." Nothing even happened, and he banned me from it. And then they never actually say that, like, I was actually hurling racial slurs at people,
mhm.
or constantly breaking rules and spamming with, like, porn or something like that. Like, whatever it is, there was always a reason behind it. But they were like, "Oh, I did literally nothing, and he banned me because he's a cunt." And someone, like, a bunch of people will follow that. I'll just be like, "Wow, that guy must have,
Mhm.
sounds like this guy's a real piece of work," Like, I don't know. There's that saying, a lie can get twice around the world before the truth has got its boots on.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a very
you
good
know,
one.
it's or like by the time you've dealt with one piece of misinformation, there'll be three more that you can never fully get to the bottom of it. It's difficult to filter the space.
I like the bullshit
So,
asymmetry, which it says bullshit is 100 times harder to refute than it is to come up with. You know, you come up with a lie, it's going to be really tough for that person to, and this could be a, rape accusation, this could be just talking shit about a friend of yours or a coworker, and it's always like, we don't think about it at the moment, but in the long run, with compounding, that thing can get really, really big and annoying. And then somebody actually meets you, and it's like, wait a minute, you're nothing like I've imagined. Some people that have met me, they'll be like, wow, you're not actually, an ego boy. You're actually a pretty
not the
down
ego
to,
boy, yeah.
It's like, oh, no shit, Sherlock, right? But there is that viewpoint, and so yeah, my next challenge is to find people that I've actually had particular drama with, been banned from their discourse too. People like Mags, I'd love to speak to him, fellow Aussie, because I think what I've learned is that people you disagree with a lot, they tend to offer you the most in terms of debate. They tend to offer you the most in terms of discourse, and that's something I'm interested in.
As long as it can be healthy, as long
Yes.
as it doesn't evolve into infighting.
Yes.
But there's always something to be offered there.
Yeah, thin line between an argument and a conflict, but we have to risk the conflict in order to get the best of the argument, I think. So there's that.
No, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. This was wonderful. We've chatted for nearly 2 hours here.
Jesus.
Yeah, well, your time flies.
Well, I got away from us there a bit, yeah.
Wonderful, yeah. So I'll be in touch with you. We're definitely gonna do this one again because you're a wonderful individual. You're extremely eloquent, well spoken. A lot of topics we can ramp around. And next time round, I'm trying to get this thing here where people actually ask the questions, and then I can filter through them. And next time that we're here, I don't have to think about a lot of them, but it's what people are actually interested in, and we can ramble on those topics.
Like I said, I'm the one who's known for rambling a bit slightly too much.
Yeah, I think that makes the two of us.
Yeah.
Makes the two of us. But yeah, for me, again, it's a wonderful way to force myself to listen, to force myself to take differing opinions, hopefully, and also revisit some of the past, because we're all, at the end of the day, for you, for me, for so many out there listening, watching, such a big portion of their lives, such a huge...
Yeah, it was a big deal at some point, at least, yeah.
Basically a third of our lives spent in there. I think that's a huge thing that cannot be understated. So thank you for joining me, and talk to you soon.
Thank you very much for having me on. Hope people have enjoyed. So yeah, if we could get to do this again sometime, I'll see you again.
Absolutely, we will. It's a pleasure. Thank you.